begin our story from 2 Kings of the prophet Elijah hiding in a cave, feeling frightened and abandoned by God's people, and God making God's self known to him, not in that big array of natural events, but in a small, still voice, the sound of sheer silence. And the psalm, these reassuring words, truly, God is very near to those. Same with Paul's letter to the Romans. The word is near you, on your lips and in your heart. And our gospel reading this morning, what do we do when our gospel reading is one that is so familiar? I think I'd like to read it again and invite you to listen again and invite you to enter the story with your imagination. Close your eyes if you like and picture yourself in the story. Imagine the sights, the smells, the sound. Picture the characters, Jesus, the disciples, even the boat itself, the wind and the waves. Where do you find yourself in this story? Who are you? And if you're in the boat, pay attention. What are you feeling? What are those around you doing? So let's listen again for the details. Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he dismissed the crowds, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But by this time, the boat, battered by the waves, was far from land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning, he came walking towards them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It's a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Sometimes when we hear Scripture in this way, when we experience Scripture differently using our imagination, something comes to us that we might not have noticed. I'm wondering if at the beginning of the reading, you noticed Jesus needing time to be by himself and go up and pray with God, and if that spoke to your own sense of time alone with God and need for prayer. Or in the midst of all that might be tossing you to and fro these days, maybe we identified with the disciples on the boat. What was it like if you were in the boat? Were you straining with an oar, paralyzed with fear, maybe arguing amongst yourselves or building each other up? What about when you see Jesus coming towards you? Could you hear Jesus speak directly to you, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid"? And Peter, perhaps we all find ourselves drawn to him. In my reflection this week, I kept wondering, why does he feel the need to get out of the boat? Impetuous, feisty Peter, who loves his Lord so much. Does he feel like he has to prove something to Jesus with his daring, "If it is you, command me to come to you"? Does something about Peter or something about us make us feel like we need to prove ourselves worthy of God's love and Jesus' saving grace? Maybe you found yourself convicted, like Peter when he starts to sink, afraid that maybe our faith is too little. That if only we had more faith, we would never falter. That life wouldn't be so hard. that the illness, the grief, the financial stress, our worries about our kids, the emptiness would all be healed if we had more faith. It's how we've often heard this story, right? Get more faith, walk on the water, do amazing things. But Jesus doesn't say that Peter has no faith. He says, little faith. And in Matthew's gospel, having little faith, faith even the size of a mustard seed, is faith capable of incredible growth, transformation, amazing things. Or maybe with Peter, you simply found yourself crying out, Lord, save me. Imagine what it feels like to reach out and put your trust completely in the outstretched hand of Jesus, God with us, who comes to us to save us again and again and again. For me, hearing this passage again this week, I found myself drawn also to the image of Jesus coming towards the disciples. In the midst of the storm, Jesus comes to them. He sees, he knows their fear, their need, and simply comes to them. And he assures them with these incredible words of comfort. Before Peter even steps out of the boat, before he even begins to sink, Jesus is there, his strong hand ready to reach out and rescue him. And we notice the movement of Jesus, always towards the disciples, always towards those he loves. What I'm hearing in the story this morning is that Jesus comes to us, whether we have an abundance of faith or even just that little mustard seed. Peter and the disciples, they didn't need to prove anything. They didn't need to prove they were worthy of Jesus' love or saving grace. Jesus was there for them, even though, as the Gospels make clear, their faith was never perfect. And that's good news, right? God is with us. God comes to us, is with us, even when we doubt, even when our faith is wavering, even and especially when we are afraid. So how do we hear this story? Reflecting on it, what does it mean for us today and in the weeks and months ahead? Can we trust that Jesus does come to us because he loves us? That we don't have to prove anything to be worthy of God's love. We are loved and valued just as we are. All summer we've heard stories of lost sheep, lost coins, prodigal sons, sowers, and mustard seeds. These are stories about us, our worth and our value to God. It's almost like when Jesus asks Peter, why do you doubt? It's like he's asking him or asking us, don't you trust that I love you? That I'm here for you? That I know every hair on your head? That I'm never going to let you fall further than I can reach out and bring you close to me? Even when we are scared to death, we can call out, Lord, save me, and the hand of God will find us. Jesus comes to us, to those he loves, when it feels like the water is over our head and even when we draw our final breath. And we know Jesus comes to us again and again and again, reaches out his saving hand again. We've seen it. We've seen it in this place, haven't we? We've seen it in our lives, in our relationships, in ministries, in how we reach out and support and share God's love and saving grace with each other. Lives touched, transformed, a way made clear when all seems lost. And that's what we're called to share. That's the work of the church, to share this good news. As summer winds down and we find ourselves gearing up for back to school, start of a new program year here at the church, as we continue our season of hopeful uncertainty, worshiping outside as our sanctuary is renovated, being church in this in-between time, I want to remind us that we are all in this together. We're all in this boat together. And the boat was the image of the church in early Christianity. And some of us may be called, like Peter, to step out of the boat with radical faith and energy. and others might be feeling a bit weary and prefer to stay in the safety of the boat. Some may be questioning their faith as the boat is tossed to and fro, and still others will find themselves faithfully pulling on the oars, doing all they can to keep the boat steady and heading in the right direction. We're all on this boat together, all of us. And Jesus is with us. Jesus comes to us in this faith community. This is where community is, where we gather in prayer, where we celebrate Eucharist week in, week out, where Jesus is our focus and love can be found so that we can go out and share that love with the world. Of course, we're going to be afraid. That is our human nature. It's normal. Storms always threaten to rumble through our lives, but Jesus has not left us alone, just the opposite. The one who joins us in the boat, the one who calms the storm and makes the wind cease, is still with us, is still coming to us. And he has work for us to do. So we don't need to fear, for he is with us always, he promises. Until the end of the age, he says. Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid. Amen.